Well, hello and welcome to another Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. I do hope you're doing well. We're doing a unit at the moment about sin and forgiveness, and we've been thinking about salvation. We've been thinking about some other Christian truths in terms of what is crime and punishment and things like that. Today, we're going to have a slightly different focus. Today, we're going to be thinking a little bit more about salvation and a little bit more about what the church is. So, to start off with, I want you just to think about this for a moment. What do you understand by the term church? What is the church? Have a think about that while you grab your pen and paper, because here's our cheesy intro music. Okay, so our title today is What Makes the Church Special? What makes the church special? As always, pause me as we go, write down your title and so on. Today we're going to understand the nature of the church. It's going to be a good outcome if you can retell three key beliefs that Christians believe. It's going to be great if you can give two pieces of information about each of these three beliefs, and even better if you can tie this information into a leaflet or drawing based on your previous knowledge. So there's lots of ways we're going to combine this. There's a lot of some reading to extract information, a bit of reflection, a bit of what you think and why, and there's our Christian value of hope. During today's lesson, we're going to look at what is church, we're going to look at ecclesia and kuriakon, where we're going to look at a grid, do some research, and there's a leaflet, and I'll probably throw an exam question in as well, because that's what I do. So, let's start with this, ecclesia and kuriakon. What do those words mean? Have a look at those pictures, but don't trust me that I've got them in the correct place. Okay, so we're going to go into the world of Greece. Now, English is a little bit of an odd language. And the reason why it's an odd language is that we like to combine different words into one word. So, for example, if I said about, let's think, love. You all have an idea what I mean by the word love. Now, let me just say I love chocolate, I love my children, I love my wife, and I aim to love people that I don't know, strangers. I hope in your heads you're understanding that my love of chocolate is very different than my love of my children. I'm not a cannibal, I do not want to eat my children, but I'm certainly a chocoholic and I would eat as much chocolate as I could be given. My love of my wife is very different than my love of a homeless person. Because what we do in English is we look at the context of the word and we say, okay, I understand what you're talking about based on the context of it. So what we're going to look at today is the word church. Now the word church in Greek has two words associated with it, in the same way it has four words associated with love in Greek. So there's eros and philia, and the ones I can't remember, agape, and one other. There you are, you don't need to know it, it's not essential, but my point is that the word love in Greek can be translated four different ways. The word church in Greek can be translated two different ways. It can be translated into ecclesia and kuriakon. Okay, now both of those are very important definitions of the word church, and in English we use the word church and we don't fully understand what it means. So, in your books I'd like to make a few notes. So, ecclesia means the people of God. It's the bottom photograph. Ecclesia means the people of God. So that's basically, if you were with a load of other Christians in your house, you would be church. You would be ecclesia. So when ecclesia meet together, they are church. It doesn't matter what building they're in. Church is the people of God. And that's primarily how the New Testament refers to church. Then you've got kuriakon. Now, kuriakon means the house of the Lord. And that's basically to do with this idea that the building is where God lives. And very much of an Old Testament idea where God dwelt within the synagogue within Jerusalem. But there are definitions of the word church. They both mean church. So we need to be really clear when we're looking at this about ecclesia and kuriakon, because depending on our understanding of what church is, will depend on the way that we need to answer an exam question on it. Okay, so that's kuriakon and ecclesia. Now, as I've sort of just intimated, that the Church of Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea in Constantinople in the 4th century, they decided on something called the Nicene Creed, a creed coming from the Greek word credos, which means I believe or we believe. And it says the church is 4 different things. It says it's holy, Catholic, apostolic, and one. Now we need to have an understanding of what those mean. So in the description below, you'll see a grid and information. We're going to come back to that later. But you'll also see a worksheet for a media clip. I'm going to play the media clip now. This is from Dynamic Catholic. And I'd like you to complete that worksheet as we go. And then we're going to come back to me and we're going to look at a grid together.
At Mass on Sunday, when we pray the Creed, we say, I believe in one holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church. What does that mean? These are known as the 4 marks of the Catholic Church and can be traced back to early Christian times. Let's take a look at them one at a time and explore what they mean for you. What does it mean that the church is one? Well, Jesus only started one church. He didn't start 5 or 10 or 100. When we talk about oneness of the church, we're talking about the unity of God's people. God wanted us to be one. The church is often referred to as the body of Christ, and Paul speaks about this beautifully in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. He speaks about how we're all given different gifts, but these gifts are given to us not for our own gratification, but for the common good, for the whole church, for the whole body of Christ. And he speaks about how we're all part of this one body, but how each part plays a unique and vital role. So what are your gifts? And how is God calling you to use those gifts for the common good? What unique and vital role is God calling you to play in the church? God's vision for the church is that all men and women be united in belief, agape love, and mission. He wants us united in belief. He wants us united in agape love. And he wants us united in mission. God's vision for the church is that we be one. This is what Jesus prayed for right before he was arrested and crucified. He prayed for his disciples. And he prayed for you and me. We read about this in chapter 17 of John's Gospel. It's a beautiful prayer for unity. But Jesus also explains why he is praying for unity. In verse 13, he prays his reason. He prays so that they may have my joy made complete in themselves. He wants our joy to be complete. He wants your joy to be complete. And that's a beautiful thing. Then he prays to God the Father. He says, I ask not only on behalf of these, but also on behalf of those who will believe in me through their word, that they may be one. Let's take one more look at that. Jesus prays, I ask not only on behalf of these, who's he talking about? The disciples, but also on behalf of those who will believe in me through their word. Who's he talking about there? He's talking about you and me. He says that they may be one. He wants there to be unity among every Christian, from the first disciples to the last believer at the end of the world. This is one of the most beautiful passages in the Bible, and perhaps the greatest prayer in the New Testament. It is God praying to God. Jesus asked the Father to give each of us perseverance, holiness, joy, and unity. Over the centuries, the oneness of the church has been attacked, questioned, and undermined. As a result, Christianity is massively divided today. But the Catholic Church remains one. It's the one church that Jesus started. People sometimes ask me, why should I stay in a Catholic Church? There are lots of reasons why you should stay Catholic and grow in your faith every day. But what's more compelling than to say, you should stay because Jesus prayed you would? There, in the Garden of Gethsemane, 2,000 years ago, Jesus saw every person who would ever think about leaving his church, and he prayed that they would stay and that they would remain one. The church is one. This is the first mark. The second mark is the church is holy. What does it mean that the church is holy? One definition of the word holy is set apart for a special purpose by God and for God. When we speak about the church being holy, it doesn't imply that all the members of the church are free from sin and selfishness. This is a common misconception. The holiness of the church is not derived from the holiness of its members, but rather from the holiness of Jesus. God created the church for a reason. So what is the purpose of the church? Jesus founded his church to continue his redemptive and sanctifying work in the world. You might be wondering what this means. Well, Jesus' redemptive work liberates us from sin, puts us back in right relationship with God, and leads us to heaven. His sanctifying work helps us to grow in holiness and become the best version of ourselves by playing the unique role that he calls us to play in his divine plan. The church is holy because Christ is holy. This is the second mark. The third mark is Catholic. Not big C Catholic, but little c Catholic. What does it mean that the church is Catholic? The word Catholic, with a small c, means universal. In this sense, the church is for everyone. Just as Jesus died and rose from the dead for everyone, church is for everyone. The church is also Catholic or universal in the sense that she has been sent out by Jesus on a mission for everyone in the human race. This small c Catholic is what we're speaking of in the Creed and the third mark of the church. When we speak of someone being Catholic with a big C, we're speaking of a baptized Christian who accepts and believes the teachings of the Catholic Church, strives to live in communion with the Church through the sacraments and her teachings, and embraces the life that Jesus calls them to. We're all called to Catholic unity as children of God, but not everyone responds to the call. The call is small c Catholic. The response is big C Catholic. The fourth and final mark of the church is apostolic. What does it mean that the Catholic Church is apostolic? This is one of the great questions of Christian history. If you can develop a clear understanding of this, a lot of the other things will just fall into place. Let's turn to the scriptures for some insight. Jesus was walking down the road one day, talking to his disciples, answering questions and asking questions. Anytime you're reading the Bible and God asks a question, you better sit up and take notice. You're about to learn something. Two questions he asked his disciples was, question number one, who do people say that I am? The disciples said, well, some say you're John the Baptist, come back from the dead, and others say you're Elijah, and others say you're one of the great prophets. Then Jesus turned to them and he said, who do you say that I am? And even as you're reading the script, you can always get the sense that this was an awkward moment. The disciples are looking at each other. Is this a trick question? Oh, you take this one, Peter. And Peter steps up and he says, you're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. And what seemed like a very spontaneous conversation then turned into something very formal when Jesus said, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Jesus goes on to say, I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Jesus gave Peter the authority to lead the church, and through Peter, he gave the other apostles authority. As Catholics, we can trace a direct line from your bishop back 2,000 years to Peter. Pope Francis is the 265th successor of Peter. This is what we mean when we say the church is apostolic. The apostles were the foundation that Jesus chose to build his church upon, and we respect that. They were the witnesses who Jesus chose to send out on a mission to the whole world. The church celebrates and defends the teachings passed on by the apostles, continues to be guided by the apostles, and carries on the mission that was entrusted first to the apostles. Your bishop is a successor to the original apostles. That's profound and beautiful. So at Mass next Sunday, you'll probably hear some people mindlessly mumbling the creed. Don't be one of them. Say it loud and proud. I believe in one holy, Catholic, and apostolic church.
Now we've got that in our heads, we're going to look at the nature of the church according to Catholics. One holy, Catholic, and apostolic church. Now this is in the Nicene Creed, so it's a creed that almost all Christians adhere to. So we do need to understand what we mean by these four terms: holy, Catholic, apostolic, and 1. To do this, there's a grid linked in the description below, and there's also some information for it. So I'd like to answer the grid and the information. It's in a PDF, so you'll be able to get that quite easily. Get that on screen, copy the grid out, print the grid off, don't mind how you do it, but summarize each of those pages of information down to maybe 2 or 3 bits of information for each part of that grid. So you're going to look at the information, and then you're going to shrink it down to 2 or 3 bits of information for each part of the grid. And when you've done that, you're going to come back to me. I'll see you in about 15 minutes or so. Okay, so now that's done, what we're now going to look at is how this fits. So you've got, why are the Holy One, Catholic and Apostolic beliefs important? That's sort of an exam question that you might be asked. You might also be asked, can salvation only be belonging to the Catholic Church? And really interesting one to think about. Okay, so your next task now is to create a leaflet which explains why belonging to the church is important. So you need to think about the theology, you need to think about the practices, and you need to think the role of community as well, with something called interfaith dialogue, the way that they get communities to talk to each other and people from other faiths, other denominations talk to each other as well. So give yourself 20 minutes or so to do that, and then come back to me. So we're going to understand the nature of the church. That was our objective. We said it'd be good if you could retell 3 key beliefs that Christians believe, and if you know about one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, you're in the right place. Great if you give 2 bits of information with those 3 beliefs, and the information if you can tie it into a leaflet. So this is our final task. I'd say with a partner, but you're going to have to do this on WhatsApp or Messenger, or just do it by yourself. Take 2 of these points and just, without looking at your notes, make a note of what you think one Holy Catholic or Apostolic means. Choose 2 of those and just make a little note about that, just to see what you learn. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for your time. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. God bless you. And I'll see you soon.